Yep. One more time. Yeah, there we go. I'm on. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties. Hey, everybody, my name is Jimmy Dean. I'm alcoholic. I'm glad to be here, New Year's Eve or no. I made my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, not my first day of sobriety, but Dallas County really wanted to get me sober. And my probation officer really thought that I needed to attend meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. She knew a lot more about AA than I did. I was filling out my court sheet. I thought everything was going along just as unmanageable as it had been before I went on probation. And I found myself in an outpatient treatment facility on a Friday. And the following Monday, the counselors needed to go on break at 6, and they dropped us off around the corner at a discussion meeting of AA. I spent the first 30 minutes forming, I would say, probably my first resentment at AA. It was Memorial Day. What in the world were y'all doing meeting on a federal holiday? I mean, I just could not even imagine what in the world this thing was. And I'm here tonight, Alice's invitation, and I want to thank anybody and everybody who has a commitment here to make sure that this meeting goes on as planned. And I appreciate beyond measure that Andrew, who is a man I sponsor, was willing and able to come on here and say some nice things. He might need to learn a little bit more about what my old grandfather used to talk about. He'd say, speakers speak and introducers introduced. But Andrew's a lawyer, in case you couldn't tell. So, they can't say anything in 2 sentences. So I'm sober tonight and grateful for my sobriety. August the 25th, 1997 is my date of sobriety. And I don't give that to impress anybody. It's just a place at which this journey began for me in earnest and has continued up and through today. I'm a member of the Chicago group in Dallas, Texas. We do not have an online presence. We went virtual at the beginning of the pandemic and stayed in the virtual world for about 14 months. And then when we were coming out of the pandemic safely in this city, it's about 125, 150 people. It's a big meeting for Dallas. We got to a point where we knew we could gather together again. We looked at, let's just say, the lay of the land in AA, and we really believed that the AA market was covered with virtual and hybrid options. And so we exercised the fourth tradition and decided we just go in-house only. And if you're ever in Dallas, Texas on a Wednesday night at 7 o'clock, we would love to have you. It's an open speaker meeting. And I think it's the best meeting in the state of Texas, best group in the state of Texas. And I hope that you feel the same way around your home group. I was introduced to what sometimes in AA we would call the maintenance steps. Again, an old timer in Alcoholics Anonymous early on said it's because, the lead-in, the short little lead-in paragraph to the collective experience that's contained in our book says what we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. And I was introduced to these steps 10 and 11, and certainly I was the beneficiary of 12 early on in my sobriety. Now, I didn't leapfrog from 2 to 12 or 2 to 10. But my sponsor knew that I would continue to cause harm. And he felt like I should begin a regular practice of learning what promptly meant in the 10th step. And I would say today, with a few years of sobriety, that the 11th step and the practice of the 11th step, and for me, it is a practice, that practice began in earnest early on in my sobriety in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I guess maybe the first thing that I'll share, certainly born of my own experience, is this is not complicated. I am sometimes not concerned, but I'm sometimes a little bit taken aback about any one of the three legacies of Alcoholics Anonymous, but certainly the recovery legacy, that any person who is new in the program would even begin to think, I'm doing this wrong. And I hope that they avail themselves of the rich, almost infinite experience that is available for us as members of AA. Sponsorship, for example. I've always had a sponsor. I didn't know you could not have a sponsor in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm really kind of glad that I didn't know. I didn't know that you didn't have a home group when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and so I've had those two men in my life the last 27 years. One the first two, second the last 25, that have certainly given me good and objective counsel. And that first sponsor early on in my sobriety, I'd probably been sober maybe, I don't know, 30 days, 45 days. And he was certainly getting the gist of the fact that my life was decidedly unstructured. And he was a firm believer that we were going to get to a point where I was going to learn that, the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, well worked, would lead me into the hands of a God of my understanding, whatever that God happened to be. I didn't come as atheist or agnostic, but I certainly came as disinterested. And so in order to begin to cultivate at least an interest in the practice, he'd make these simple suggestions. He said, Jimmy, what time does everybody get to work over there in that office that you've been hanging out at for the past 13 years? I said, oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe it. 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. I just thought it was abhorrent that they would get there that early in the morning. He said, show up at 8:30 when everybody else shows up at 8:30. And he said, here's a novel idea. Stay all day long. Stay all day long. And I began to implement some of those things. And then, I called every morning at 7:30 in the morning, and he didn't give me any detailed review or any actions necessarily to take specifically during the course of a day. He'd kind of talk a little bit about what he thought his day was going to look like based on the review that he'd started the night before. Go figure. And he said, here's what I think you should do. He said, I want you to, tomorrow morning, I want you to take 5 minutes before you call me and not think about anything at all. And I thought, there you go. There's never been any ask any easier than that. Because I was 32 when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'd been not thinking about anything for years before I came to AA. And so I got a fresh pack of cigarettes and a hot cup of coffee, and I went out on the back patio, and I got set up to not think, right? I don't know how long. Let me give myself some props tonight with my friends in Alcoholics Anonymous. Let's say I made 40 seconds. In about 40 seconds, I started thinking, oh my gosh, those people hate me at that office. I hate going over there. I mean, you could just feel it. I mean, they just can't stand me. And my parents had died when I was young. There's a little girl in the back of me. Is my grandmother is a little girl, and she had raised me, and I wasn't welcome in her home when I came to AA. And I think, oh my gosh, how do you make that right? I'd heard somebody use the phrase stealing people's peace of mind. And I certainly was familiar with the fact that we had these 12 steps and we were able to clean up the wreckage of our past along the way over time, and that took some time. But, I was new in Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, I was a baby in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I needed the fix that came from Dr. Smirnoff, right? Or a fix that came from Weller's or Maker's Mark or Tanqueray Gin. It just made everything seem like it was a million years away. And I felt like I needed those things, right? And so all those things began to whirl through my mind from 40 seconds up and through the 5-minute mark. And then it's 7:30. It's time to call that sponsor. And we're just going to have that, hope you have a good day today. I have a good day today. And, I'm at a crossroads, right? I'm at a crossroads far beyond measure as far as the importance of that particular conversation that morning. Only in hindsight can I tell you what a crucial point that is in my recovery. Because you see, I don't have to tell him anything at all. He may not even ask me the question about whether or not I took the 5 minutes. But as we're beginning to close that, I don't know, 8 or 10 minute conversation around 7:40 that morning, he said, I asked you to do something for me this morning. That 5 minutes, how did you do? And there's where I am, right? I'm at the precipice, and something takes over that's not of me. And I said, I only made it about, I don't know, 20 or 30 seconds. I wait for the reprisal, right? I wait for axes to grind and lectures to endure. And he says, try again tomorrow. And I've been trying this step again tomorrow for the past 27 years, right? I try again tomorrow. Pausing when agitated. I had absolutely no idea nor any tools to employ in order to pause. My mouth was my own worst enemy. I jumped into situations in which I had absolutely no business whatsoever. You could call it one-upsmanship, one-downmanship. You could call it pretty much anything at all. I was lousy with the tongue. Some of those old-time sobriety people I got to hang around, certainly up and through now, but all those old people are in the big meeting now. They teach me some catchphrases that were vitally important because I'd already learned that it was smug and indifferent to just close your mouth and turn and walk away. There were ways that sober alcoholics that believed in the spiritual principles that were embodied in the steps, there were ways in which those sober AA members were able to engage with other human beings without offending anyone at all. You may be right, they said. Why don't you try that phrase? You know what? You may be right. And then keep your mouth shut and let the conversation unfold as it would naturally unfold. Pausing when agitated, right? Pausing when doubtful. Asking for the intuitive thought or decision required a pattern that was established beginning with the practice that's talked about on the facing page. And none of those 70 odd people that were sober collective experiences in our book, none of those people shied away about this absolute belief, whether they believed in God or not, didn't matter, that they believed in this seeking. They believed in trying to find some higher course of spiritual action that would enable them to not take the actions that a guy like me takes, and ultimately results in the fact that I have to run to the drink, right? I have to run to the drink. That's not the beginning, it's the end. And by the time I'm really formally introduced to this step, I really do have a wealth of my own experience, right? I've looked at my own conditions, and you know what? The first 9 steps in Alcoholics Anonymous give a guy like me, a 32-year-old man who's acting like a kid, give me the opportunity to say, yes, I have full ownership of all of my own actions. How do I do that, right? How do I not offend anybody anymore to the extent possible? How to engage with people who have given me the opportunity to continue to have some sort of relationship with them? I need to employ all those facets of the 11th step, right? I constructively review the day. Tonight, probably won't make it till midnight Central Time, but tonight I will constructively review my day. I worked today, right? I actually am gainfully employed and I'm actually earning some of the money they're giving me. What kind of interactions did I have with my fellow employees today? Was I resentful, dishonest, afraid, angry? What kind of interaction did I have with that clerk at 7-Eleven when the gas pump wouldn't take my credit card? How did I respond when they said, basically by their attitude, ideas, and actions, that they weren't particularly concerned whether or not I could pump gas or not? How do I act? There was a young woman came to our group 25 years ago. It was a Thursday night. We did a book study at that old group on Thursday night. Oh, I was feeling it that night. You know how you feel it, right? You feel the topic. I mean, I felt the topic. I was hoping that chairperson would call on me. about half past. I can't tell you now what we read or anything that I said, but at the time I thought, my God, it's getting hot in this room, right? I was really bringing it. Guns a-blazing, right? There was a young woman, had about 15 days of sobriety. I spent about 10 or 15 minutes talking to her after the meeting was over, introduced her a couple of women. She actually went to dinner. It was a fantastic experience. Next day, Friday, over lunch, I'm in line at a Subway across the street from a hospital not far from my office, smack dab in the middle of Dallas. There's a line, it's about 20 people long. I don't like waiting in lines. I didn't pause when I was agitated. I look ahead of me, I look behind me. I want everybody to know, everybody who's in earshot, I want everybody to know how irritated I am that I am having to wait in order to get in that line and get through Subway. By the time I get inside, some of those other character flaws are alive and well and working in my life. The flaws where I say, I'm getting rid of all this Subway stock. The minute I can get this deal, I didn't own a barely owned a car, much less any stock in Subway. I am big dogging it, right? And I want everybody to know. And when I insult the person who's making the sandwich because I feel like they're inept, I turn around and I look towards the back of that line. There's that new girl with 15 days of sobriety. What'd she think about AA? What'd she think about the example? At 15 days, she doesn't know what to keep. She doesn't know what to throw away. She just sees the duplicitous aspect of something that I'm going to tell you was certainly not attractive. I go back to the book. I go back to these parts of the book. I go back to my sponsor. I find out exactly what practices he puts in place, or these other AA members, what practices they put in place. I began to get more and more interested about exactly what those windows of time look like in order to constructively review my day in the evening, and certainly how we pause and how we go about not setting ourselves up, not setting myself up to continue to have to lather, rinse, repeat the 10th step over and over and over again with people in and out of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. How do I become the guy that the book asked me to be based on the experience of those first 70 odd members? How do I become that guy when nobody's looking? That's really important. How do I do that? I believe that this step in particular, in my experience and in my life, has fundamentally changed certainly all the aspects of the way I conduct these 24-hour periods of time that I get to share. I'm certainly much more appreciative for just the gift of being. And I'm not a guy who's deep. I'm not a guy who's extraordinarily introspective. I'm not somebody who seeks out necessarily all sorts of different parts and pieces of spiritual material. I'd run to my faith of origin. I'm not the only AA member that had done that. I'd run to my faith of origin many times before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. My mother was very devout in my faith and believed that it was important for her to show her only child, me, what it meant to her to surrender to a power greater than herself. I didn't think that turned out very well for her. She died in a car wreck when I was 8 years old, and certainly everybody did more than enough. And I was grossly overcompensated all through my life because of tragic things that happened early on. But, I formed my own experience based on my perception. And alcoholic perception, whether you're drinking or not, is bad perception most of the time. And so I'm running with that, and I'm living my life according to the tools that I've manufactured for myself, and being unstructured, living in some degree of chaos is not. I can't blame that on alcoholism. In fact, if anything, sometimes alcoholism kind of tempered the chaos. It certainly covered it up because it looked like it was a condition of the drinking. Whereas in my experience, if I could have employed alcohol successfully, never would have been a problem. There are a whole lot of people, half the United States of America, this is their night to drink. I hope they do it safely, but this is their night to drink. I had New Year's week. So did you. 2 weeks, maybe sometimes. And I didn't know anything about the fact it was December 31st. Who cared? December 16th, just the same. Didn't make any difference at all. And so I lived in a state of inebriation as often as I possibly could to ignore the things I'd done the last time I was in a state of inebriation. And when I sobered up, I was really in pain. That was the tough part. How do you do that? How do you answer the telephone? How do you open your mail? I needed prayer and meditation around the simplest of tasks. How do you make telephone calls to begin to try to reinitiate the relationship that I have destroyed with that grandmother, right? Who'd given me almost everything, right? Absolutely almost everything. In fact, she gave enough to almost kill me. So wrapping this up, I was probably 5 years, 6 years in the program, active, involved, sponsoring people, regular member of a home group, active in service in Alcoholics Anonymous. My old home group it had problems. It had some disunifying aspects that had been introduced into it, and it was having some trouble. And thank goodness those members were getting good counsel from their respective sponsors, and they said, the best thing for you to do is go and do something different, and leave those people alone. And that became the formation of the Chicago group. And I was a member of that Chicago group, but I didn't necessarily have active controversy in the old group, but I was unhappy about that because, see, I thought, you found a home group, you stayed at the home group forever. I thought you got a sponsor and you stayed with the sponsor forever till one of you died. That's the way that worked, right? I mean, I form all these perceptions, notions, all of this on my own, right? And so I've got all these ideas about where I should be at 5 years of continuous sobriety. I mean, I've put a lot of sweat equity into Alcoholics Anonymous, right? I've put my nose to the grindstone of AA. I've done my part, right? Where's the response to that? Well, that's all made up. That's all a figment of my imagination in sobriety. So I'm angry, I'm resentful. I don't necessarily discuss that in detail with that sponsor because, he's just going to give me a bunch of stupid stuff to do that doesn't have anything at all to do with my problem. So the first thing I relieve myself of are the things that I think are interfering with my ability to conduct my life. Prayer and meditation time, pausing when agitated. I can tell you that in the eyes of others who have known you before you drank, for a guy like me, it'll take me all of about 2 or 3 interchanges with you to remove everything that even remotely looked like sober behavior. I can take it all away and never take a drink. And that's where I am. And my sponsor gave me an ultimatum, thank goodness, because I was shirking my Sunday relationship to my grandmother. And he said, you go over there next Sunday and you do everything that she wants you to do, no question. And he used some words that I won't use in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was angry and I was upset, but I heard his voice and I followed his suggestion. And we went through some boxes and some picture albums from her attic that I'm going to tell you I never would have looked at, because there are a lot of people aren't here anymore, and I don't want to see any of that. I don't want to feel any of that. And remember, I'm spiritually unprepared at this point. But I did what I was asked to do, and I learned a whole lot about about people I never would have known. And at the bottom of the second box was a missalette. The only reason I picked it up is it had a beautiful tooled gold cover. And I thought, that book is old and it's probably worth something. And I took it home. And the next morning I went outside, smoked cigarettes, drank coffee, and think about how I could run my day. And when I opened and investigated this particular piece of material, it had a book plate in it. It was given to my mother on her first communion. May not mean anything to you, and has absolutely nothing to do with secular religion at all. I am not introducing an outside topic into a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm telling you that I was sent a message for me, and the message said, pay attention. And I flipped through the pages of that book over a period of the next few weeks, and there are little notes in the margins, just like we would make notes of various pieces of material that we use either in or out of AA on a regular basis. And I began to learn more about my mother, who left the earth when I was 8 years old, than I'd ever known before. And the God of my understanding said, come close, pay attention, do what these other people have done. Surrender to a power, any power that you feel is greater than yourself. Continue the measure of surrender, because you know what, Jimmy? You're a settler, and settlers don't fare well in this deal. You must continue to advance to the extent possible and try to the best of your ability to share freely with others that, yes, we are in fact a spiritual program of action. Revisionist history is not for a guy like me. I can't remove what AA is and why it is. And it is not religious, but it is definitely and intently and emphatically a spiritual entity. And if you take the spiritual out of Alcoholics Anonymous, all we have is some really, really bad furniture. And so I am thankful and I'm grateful to see all your smiling faces, and I wish you all happy and fruitful 2025. Thanks.
Oh, it's great to see hands up. Sarah, come on in.
Thank you, John. Thank you. I'm Sarah. I'm an alcoholic. Thank you, Jimmy. Wow, you had me at the edge of my seat. You just had so many nuggets you shared. But the one that caught me was towards the end when you said, I think your sponsor said, Jimmy, you're a settler. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that, please?
Thank you, Sarah. It's good to see you. I think that my experience is that I can take this structure aspect of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? The book says we're undisciplined, right? And so we allow this power, or we ask this power to help discipline us, really, I believe, so we can be more effective, right? Trying to approach a greater degree of effectiveness. And so I can take that and say, okay, this is becoming, let's just say, more and more of a material relationship rather than a spiritual relationship. In other words, I'll commit to 15 minutes of prayer and meditation in the morning, and no more than 15 minutes of prayer and meditation in the morning, right? I'll tell myself that I'll listen as if I have no opinion, but yet practical application of that shows that I am not really willing, right? And of myself, I don't know that I can be willing. I'm not asking for the willingness or asking for the capability or the ability to do these things, right? And so, I don't, have that 30,000-foot view of the fellowship, and I certainly only have the interactions that I have, but it is perhaps not uncommon in Alcoholics Anonymous that our relationships with AA become more transactional. In other words, I check into AA, I get a little AA, I check back out again, right? I check into AA, I get a little more AA, I check back out again. So what I've found is there's a vast difference between going to Alcoholics Anonymous and being in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm really glad that I'm in AA, and not trying to speak in riddles, but I think it's, we all get to decide, what we're going to do and who we're going to be. But if we really had a lot of fallout, during that initial flying blind period in 2020, it's because I think we had a lot of people who had no idea how tenuous their connection was to the recovery program. They thought they were connected to the program, but really they were materially associated with the transactional aspects of the fellowship, if that makes any sense. I thank you for the question.
Thank you for the answer, Jimmy. Dina, come on in. It's great to see you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dina T, alcoholic. Thank you so much, Jimmy, for your talk tonight and everybody doing service here. I'd like for you, I loved what you just said about that going to AA and being in AA. I'd love for you to elaborate on that. And then, I don't know, but mainly, what does your nightly routine look like?
So I have about 30 or 40 minutes in the evening generally. It can be an hour, sometimes an hour and 15 minutes. I have 2 committed AA meetings a week. Now, that doesn't mean that's the only AA I'm in, but so there, I would say a more abbreviated pattern on Monday and Wednesday nights than in other nights of the week. But to be consistent with reading, I read pieces of secular material. I've got a daily reader that is not AA conference approved material, seems to source and help keep me centered. And then I read 2 or 3 pages of the book Alcoholics Anonymous every day, a little bit of the 12 and 12. Right now I'm going back through Alcoholics Anonymous Comes of Age, and you can say, oh my gosh, what in the world that's spiritual do you get out of that? Just the seconds and inches aspect of all of that. And I think about the inheritance. I believe I don't know necessarily whether or not we could say that it's all spiritually inspired, but the inheritance, certainly in the belief that a flawed human being like me can actually try to contribute something to this deal, is innately spiritual. So, it can be an hour and 15 minutes. That time is expanded the longer I've been sober. And so, Dina, I appreciate your question. I hope I touched on it. Yeah, so thanks.
You absolutely did. Thanks, Jimmy. Hey, Andy, come on in. It's great to have you with us.
Thanks, and thanks very much, Jimmy. Andy Crooks, and I'm an alcoholic. Building on Dina's most excellent question about your evening routines, during the day, do you have habits or practices that you've found helpful?
Yes, I really believe in that pause when agitated. And again, I was employed. I wasn't working for them, but I was employed, same company that I'm in today, for 13 years drinking. So those relationships during the day, interactions with other people during the day, caused me a lot of pause early on. Once I had a little bit of time in the program and actually had some exposure to some of the principles in the steps, I'd go back to my sponsor truthfully and say, this is the most dysfunctional organization I've ever seen. And he said, well, how in the world do you think you've navigated that deal for 13 years, right? And we do these commitments. I made 1-year commitments to continue with my employment for years and years and years. It was almost like an annual renewal. I'll stay 1 more year and try to do this. But, I've teleworked since the pandemic. So infrequent interaction with coworkers, but I just remember how important it was to learn that I could go outside. All the men I sponsor know this, right? You can't have a smug look and turn and walk away from a conversation that is, needs some pausing. But you can certainly use your opportunity to say, can you excuse me for 5 minutes, and go outside where nobody can hear you and say what you need to say, and then come back in so you can re-engage. And I do some disengagement and re-engagement on a fairly regular basis, right? It sounds really superficial and stupid, but the deal with the gas pump not working today, there were 2 of them back to back. And I was furious when I left the bay. But I paused on the way inside the building because all those things are front of mind about, you know, what kind of guy do I want to be? And so I think that we have so many, I don't want to necessarily, maybe I shouldn't use the word outs, but oh my gosh, practical application of the spiritual aspects of the program, right? And I enjoy meetings as much as anyone, right? But I don't need to be coming in here and dumping my crap with a bunch of my fellow AA members who are trying to the best of their ability to approach a greater spiritual consciousness just as I am, because I don't abut my behavior by saying, if I had done what I know will work, these things would not have happened to me. I don't give the preface, the prefix and the suffix. I just dump the problem, right? Thanks. Thanks, Andy. Good to see you.
Thanks for the question, Andy. Mike B, come on in. It's great to see you.
Jimmy, thank you. Mike Alcoholic. That was really good. And I took a lot of notes, but I'm going to circle back. I was lousy with the tongue too. And I'm kind of embarrassed to say this, but it's only been in the last couple of months that I realized that pause when agitated was step 11. When I heard somebody saying that they walked around with that during their step 11 during the day, I'm trying to figure out, well, how do they do? What do you mean you walk around with your prayer and meditation? So anyway, long story short is, I heard you say right at the very beginning that you start the guys or the people that you work with early in AA on step 11. Explain that a little more, would you please?
To read the pages that are the collective experience or the directions in our book based on 80, and I'm not a page quoter, but around starts at 84 and runs through 87 or 88 to initiate them to the practice, the 10th and the 11th steps, right? And then trying to see, I'm not the only person in the room. I've sponsored people. One in particular comes to mind who was, an amazing atheist. I mean, he was on fire for not believing, and he wasn't necessarily publicly abrasive about it in AA, but he was behind that 1,000%. And he said, "This contradicts every single thing that I know to be what I am here for, to begin this practice of trying to seek a relationship with any power that's greater than myself." I said, "Well, you're missing the very beginning, which is we're not talking about God by itself. We're talking about finding a power." And then I paused because I was agitated because he was agitated. And I said, not believing in anything at all is believing in something. So why don't you just start believing in not anything at all as your higher power, and let's get off the dime. I mean, it's time to move on, right? And if you want to be, again, a professed and emphatic supporter of, non-theistic behavior, AA is your place. That's fine. But we're a spiritual organization who really feels like that the arresting of alcoholism is contingent upon some sort of development of a relationship with some power. And I just don't see any piece of material that we produced yet. Now, make a note, December 31st, 2024, I say yet. I don't see any piece of material we've produced yet that will directly contradict what they talk to us about in the text, basic text of our book, as it relates to trying to perfect and enlarge this spiritual relationship. So thanks, Mike. You're from a beautiful part of the world, Mike, Napa. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you, Jimmy. Paul, do you mind just turning your camera on for us, Paul? Are you there, Paul?
Can unmute. Oh, now it is. Okay. Can you see me?
No, but it's all good. We could hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks to your share. What I have, my question is basically about pausing. I have a lot of difficulty with that. It's something that you get better at as time goes on. I find it really difficult in the moment if I'm angry or whatever it is to actually pauses and do what this step suggests. Number one, do you have any tips? And number two, is this something that you get better with as time goes on? Thank you.
John, Paul, I'm sorry, but my audio was a little broken up. John, did you hear? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I caught the gist of it is, is this something you get better with over time, and how do you get there?
First of all, again, only speaking from my own experience, I don't think the number of consecutive days that have been gathered together without taking a drink necessarily have a direct relationship to these practices, really around any of the steps. I certainly think I'm gathering greater and greater amounts of experience by being integrated into the fabric of AA, right? You guys know what I mean when I say, all in. And all in doesn't mean every waking moment is occupied by Alcoholics Anonymous. It just means all in. Being sensitive to areas where I can hear about things that people are putting into common practice in order to live this life one day at a time. And so, yes, absolutely. There are so many pieces of material, both in an AA and out of AA, that I have been exposed to during the period of time that I've been sober, that yes, we get better. I think we get more intuitive. We get more intuitive as time passes when we are practicing this way of life. Just like I got better at lying before I came to AA. Didn't have anything to do with drinking, but I got better and better and better at lying because I practiced lying. I practiced lying and I was good at it. I got better and better and better at subversive behavior. Not everybody has to have subversive behavior, but I got better and better and better at it because I continued to practice it. So just like all of those things that I did or that I collected that I still have with me, but thank goodness they're asleep. They're in sleep mode right now. I get better and better and better with these positive aspects that I've been introduced to of living, aspects of living. Right? The bottles are only a symbol deal is real. We're not needing to talk about whether or not we're going to drink on New Year's Eve because we have a plan of action that absolutely works. And to the extent that I'm willing to surrender to that plan, a drink is not on my radar. It doesn't mean that I'm cured of alcoholism. It means that because I am not cured, I'm going to continue to the best of my ability to try to listen intently, pay close attention, use the tools that have been freely given to me at every single moment in time in which I know that they are necessary, and I need them more on my best day than I ever did on my worst day. Because on my very first best day, I think, I got this. I got this. I don't need any of that mess. I don't need to talk to those yahoos I sponsor. Most of them I don't even like. I don't need any of that. No, I got this. And then when I start with that, it's the downhill slope. So anything and everything is possible. And sharing the experience of what you found, the discoveries of what you found, continues to enhance and enlarge this composite experience in AA, where we get to share these things. I hate to tell you guys, but it's the other 23 hours, right? I mean, I love where we are right now, but somebody's got something that they need to share over a cup of coffee or a hamburger or a one-on-one Zoom call or something. And I need to be at the ready for that. I need to be at the ready for that because alcoholism is inconvenient. It's just inconvenient. So thanks.
Beautiful. Beautiful share. Thank you so much, Jimmy. That concludes the Q&A. I'm gonna pass it back over to my friend Teresa.
Thank you. Let me see if I get some more lighting. I'm in the car.